The massive observation deck of Titan Station hummed with quiet efficiency as Commander Hyun-woo pressed his face against the reinforced viewing port. Below him, the blue and white marble of Earth rotated slowly in the darkness of space, beautiful and completely silent. He had been watching this world for 30 years now, and every single day brought the same result. Nothing. "Commander, you're doing it again," said Lieutenant J-Minute as he floated up beside him. The young officer's tentacles curled around a cup of hot synthetic coffee, the steam rising in lazy spirals in the station's recycled air. His blue skin had the shimmer that marked him as one of the Waterworld people from the Aquarian systems. Hyun-woo did not look away from the planet below. Doing what? Staring at that dead rock like it's going to suddenly start talking to you. J-Minute took a sip of his coffee and shook his head. "Sir, with respect, it's been 250 years. Nothing lives down there anymore." "It has a name," Hyun-woo said quietly, his breath fogging the thick glass. "Earth. That world has a name, and it once held 8 billion thinking beings." J-Minute's tentacles twitched with impatience. "Had, sir. Past tense. The humans are gone. Have been for centuries." The older commander finally turned away from the window and walked to his monitoring station. Banks of sensors and computers lined the walls, all of them focused on the silent world below. Every few minutes, automated systems swept the planet with scanning beams, looking for any sign of life, any hint of technology, any whisper of electromagnetic activity. The results were always the same. "Look at this," Hyun-woo said, pulling up a holographic display that showed Earth's communication history. For nearly 200 years, from 1900 to 2087, they were constantly talking. Radio waves, television signals, satellite communications, digital transmissions. They filled the space around their world with noise and chatter and music and messages. The hologram showed waves of colorful energy radiating out from Earth like ripples in a pond. Then, suddenly, the waves stopped. The display showed a sharp line where all activity simply ended. On March 15, 2087, at 14:32 Universal Standard Time, every single transmission from Earth stopped at exactly the same moment, Hyun-woo continued. Not gradually. Not one by one. All of them. Instantly. J-Minute floated closer to look at the display. So? Maybe they had a solar storm. Or a nuclear war. Or their technology broke down. That's what the council thinks, Hyun-woo nodded. That's what everyone thinks. The humans finally did what most aggressive species do. They destroyed themselves before they could grow up and join the galaxy properly. The lieutenant's tentacles curled thoughtfully. You don't think so? Hyun-woo walked to another console and brought up a different set of readings. Look at this data from the past 50 years. Surface temperature changes. Atmospheric composition shifts. Geological activity. Energy signatures that our computers cannot identify. The new display showed Earth glowing with strange patterns of heat and cold. The atmosphere had traces of elements that should not exist naturally. And deep underground, something was generating power on a scale that made no scientific sense. The planet is changing, Hyun-woo said. Not dying. Changing. Something is still alive down there, and it's doing things to that world that we don't understand. J-Minute studied the readings with growing interest. Have you reported this to the Confederation Council? Every month for the past 15 years, Hyun-woo replied with a bitter laugh. They file my reports and forget about them. As far as the Council is concerned, Earth is a dead world that serves as a good example of what happens when species develop too fast. The lieutenant floated silently for a moment, processing this information. What do you think really happened to them? Hyun-woo returned to the viewing port and looked down at Earth again. I think they're still there. I think they chose to stop talking to the galaxy for a reason. And I think they've been using these past 2.5 centuries to prepare for something. Prepare for what? I don't know, the commander admitted. But look at their history. Humans were always different from other species. Most civilizations developed slowly, taking millions of years to go from simple tools to space travel. Humans did it in less than 10,000 years. They went from riding horses to walking on their moon in just 70 years. J-Minute's eyes widened as he considered this. That's impossibly fast. Exactly. And they were violent, yes, but they were also curious and creative in ways that scared a lot of the older species in the Confederation. They asked questions that others had stopped asking millions of years ago. They tried things that others said were too dangerous or impossible. The two officers stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Earth turn in the darkness. Finally, J-Minute spoke again. So you think they're down there right now? Planning something? Hyunwoo nodded slowly. The silence feels wrong, Lieutenant. Not like death. Like patience. Like they're waiting for the right moment to speak again. And when they do? The commander smiled for the first time in weeks. When they do, I have a feeling the whole galaxy is going to listen very carefully. Far below them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, keeping its secrets hidden beneath clouds and continents that had been mysteriously quiet for 2.5 centuries. Dr. So-young's scaled fingers trembled as she adjusted the high-powered telescope for the 100th time that morning. Her reptilian eyes, designed to see across multiple light spectrums, widened in disbelief at what appeared on Earth's surface below. Where yesterday there had been empty grassland, now stood a massive structure that looked like it was made of pure crystal and starlight. "This is impossible," she whispered, her forked tongue flicking out to taste the recycled air of the research station. "Captain Donghyun, come look at this immediately." Her research partner drifted over in his special environmental suit, his gaseous body shimmering like heated air. Inside the transparent container, clouds of colored vapor swirled and pulsed with his emotions. Right now, those colors showed deep concern mixed with curiosity. "What have you found now, So-young?" His voice came through the suit speakers with a sound like wind through caves. "Another one of your mysterious energy readings." "Look for yourself," she said, stepping back from the telescope. Grid reference 774. "Tell me what you see." Donghyun's gaseous form compressed as he focused his attention through the viewing device. The colors in his suit shifted rapidly from curiosity to shock to something that could only be described as fear. "By the ancient winds," he breathed. "That was not there yesterday. I am certain it was not there yesterday." So-young nodded grimly and spoke into her recording device. Day 237 of continued observation. New structure appeared overnight in former North American continent. Height approximately 2,000 meters. Composition unknown. Architecture follows no known building principles from any species in the Confederation database. She moved to another telescope and began scanning other parts of the planet. "And it's not the only one. Look here, and over here. They're appearing everywhere." Donghyun floated from viewport to viewport, his gaseous form growing more agitated with each new discovery. "So-young, these structures, they are not built. They look grown. Like living things that crystallized in perfect mathematical shapes." "That's exactly what I thought," she agreed, her tail lashing with excitement. "But look at the energy readings. These things are generating power. Massive amounts of power. More than some of our space stations produce." The two scientists worked in focused silence for several hours, documenting and recording everything they could see. The structures on Earth were unlike anything in their extensive databases. They rose from the ground in spiraling towers that seemed to bend light around themselves. Some were transparent and filled with moving patterns of colored energy. Others appeared solid but cast shadows that moved independently of the structures themselves. "The atmospheric readings are even stranger," So-young said, pulling up data on her computer screen. "I'm detecting trace elements that should not exist in nature. Elements with atomic structures that our periodic tables say are impossible." Donghyun's colors shifted to deep purple, indicating intense concentration. "Show me the ocean scans." So-young switched displays, and both scientists fell silent. Beneath Earth's oceans, massive structures were growing upward like underwater mountains. But these were not made of rock or coral. They pulsed with the same strange energy as the land-based formations, and they were reaching toward the surface with obvious purpose. "It's like they're building bridges," Donghyun observed. "From the ocean floor to the surface, and from the surface toward space." "Building? Or growing?" So-young asked. "Look at the time-lapse imaging from the past week." The computer showed a rapid sequence of images that revealed the structures literally growing from nothing. They started as tiny points of light that expanded and shaped themselves according to some invisible plan. No construction equipment, no builders, no materials being transported. Just pure creation from empty space. "This violates every law of physics we understand," Donghyun said, his gaseous form now cycling through colors that indicated complete confusion. "Matter cannot simply appear from nothing." So-young turned away from the monitors and looked directly at her partner. "Unless the humans discovered something during their silence. Something that lets them manipulate reality itself." "That's impossible. No species has ever developed that kind of technology. The energy requirements alone would be exactly what we're measuring from those structures," So-young interrupted. "Face the facts, my friend. The humans are not extinct. They have been using these past 2.5 centuries to become something we have never seen before. Dong-hyun floated silently for a long moment, processing this information. Have you sent your reports to the Confederation Council? So-young's laugh was bitter and harsh. Every day for the past year. They file them under unconfirmed observations and ignore them. As far as the Council is concerned, Earth is a dead world and I am a foolish scientist seeing patterns where none exist. But the evidence. The Council does not want evidence, she said sharply. They want Earth to stay dead and silent so they don't have to deal with what the humans might have become. Both scientists returned to their observations, documenting structures that continue to appear across Earth's surface with increasing frequency. The planet below them was transforming into something beautiful and terrifying, covered in geometric formations that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. So-young, Dong-hyun said quietly, what do you think will happen when the Council can no longer ignore what is happening down there? The reptilian scientist smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. I think the galaxy is about to discover that humanity's silence was not the end of their story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter that none of us are prepared to read. Ambassador Jin-ae was cutting into her roasted nebula fruit when the voice appeared inside her head. Not heard through her ears, not spoken aloud, but simply there in her mind as clearly as her own thoughts. The silver fork fell from her hand and clattered onto the crystal plate as the words formed with perfect clarity. We are ready to talk. Come to Sol 3. Come in peace. Around the grand dining hall of the Galactic Confederation Central Station, chaos erupted instantly. The crystalline delegate from Arcturus began flickering like a broken light, his transparent body shifting between colors as he tried to process what had just happened. The hive mind representatives from the outer rim started buzzing and clicking in rapid overlapping voices, their shared consciousness struggling to understand how something could speak directly to their thoughts. Council leader Taiho dropped his glass of fermented cloud wine, the purple liquid spreading across the white tablecloth as his normally blue skin turned pale gray with shock. This is impossible, he stammered, his 3 eyes darting around the room. No species has ever developed direct consciousness transmission technology. Jin-ae pressed her hands against her temples, trying to understand what had just happened to her mind. The voice had not spoken in any language she knew, yet she had understood every word perfectly. More than understood, the meaning had been placed directly into her thoughts with surgical precision, leaving no room for confusion or misinterpretation. But the message was not finished. As she sat there trembling, more information began flowing into her consciousness like water filling a cup. Navigation charts appeared in her mind's eye, showing detailed star maps of the Sol system. Approach vectors were drawn in glowing lines across her thoughts, along with safe passage routes through what appeared to be some kind of massive defensive network. Everyone received it, gasped Ambassador Krillex from the insectoid worlds, his compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights that had begun flashing throughout the station. Every single being in this room heard the same message at the same moment. Jin-ae stood up slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. Around the dining hall, representatives from 4 to 7 different species were all showing the same signs of shock and confusion. Some were holding their heads, others were speaking rapidly into communication devices, and a few had simply collapsed into their chairs with overwhelming disbelief. The humans, she whispered, and the words seemed to echo through the sudden silence that had fallen over the room. This came from Earth. Council leader Taiho activated the emergency communication system with shaking fingers. Within minutes, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Every space station, every colony world, every ship within 50 light-years of Sol had received the same message at exactly the same time. Sir, came the voice of Communication Officer Yeoljin through the speakers, we're receiving confirmation from monitoring stations throughout the sector. The transmission did not use any known form of electromagnetic energy. It simply appeared in the minds of every sentient being simultaneously. The hive mind delegate finally managed to speak in a unified voice. This technology should not exist. To transmit thoughts directly into consciousness across interstellar distances would require energy levels greater than most stars produce. Jin-ae walked to the large viewing window that showed the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, 50 light-years away, the silent world of Earth had finally spoken again. But they had not used radio waves or hyperspace communication. They had reached directly into the minds of every thinking being within range and delivered their message with impossible precision. What does it mean? Asked the crystalline delegate, his form now a nervous amber color. Come to Sol 3. Come in peace. Are they inviting us? Or warning us? The navigation data suggests invitation, Jin-ae said, still processing the star charts that had been downloaded into her memory. They have provided safe passage routes through what appears to be a defensive grid surrounding their entire solar system. Taiho pulled up a holographic display showing the Sol system as it had been monitored for the past 250 years. There was no defensive grid around Sol when the humans went silent. Our long-range sensors would have detected such construction. Perhaps their defensive grid is like their communication technology, suggested Jin-Ae quietly. Beyond our ability to detect or understand. The room fell silent as the implications of this possibility settled over the assembled ambassadors. For 2.5 centuries, the galaxy had assumed that humanity had destroyed itself through war or environmental collapse. Earth had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happened to aggressive species that developed too quickly. But now it seemed the humans had been using their silence for something else entirely. They had been developing technologies that made the rest of the galaxy look primitive by comparison. We need to convene an emergency session of the full Confederation Council, Taiho announced. Every member species needs to hear about this. Jin-Ae nodded, but her attention remained focused on the stars outside the window. The question is not whether we should respond to their invitation. The question is whether we are prepared for what we might find when we arrive at Earth. She touched her temple gently, where the human message still resonated in her thoughts. After 250 years of silence, humanity had not just returned to galactic communication. They had revolutionized it in ways that challenged everything the Confederation thought they knew about science, technology, and the limits of what was possible. The age of human silence was over, and Jin-Ae suspected that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Admiral Kyung-ho had seen many strange things during his 40 years of service in the Galactic Confederation fleet, but nothing had prepared him for what waited at the edge of the Sol system. His flagship, the Harmony of Stars, dropped out of hyperspace with its usual mechanical precision, but the moment the viewports cleared, every person on the bridge fell into stunned silence. "By the ancient void," whispered Navigator Unji, her normally steady voice cracking with disbelief. "Admiral, this is not the same system we have in our records." The Sol system had been transformed beyond recognition. Where once there had been empty space and scattered rocks, now there stood structures that seemed to defy every law of physics and engineering that the galaxy understood. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had become a vast manufacturing complex, with installations that appeared to have grown like living things rather than being built by machines. Communications Officer Minute Ho, Kyung-ho said, struggling to keep his voice calm and professional. "Are you detecting any construction equipment? Any signs of how these structures were built?" "No, sir," came the reply from the young officer whose blue skin had turned pale with shock. "There are no construction ships, no transport vessels, no manufacturing facilities. These structures appear to have simply grown into existence." Through the main viewport, Mars glowed with city-sized installations that pulsed with soft, warm light. The red planet looked more like a massive jewel than the barren rock it had once been. But even more incredible was Venus, which had been wrapped in gleaming orbital rings that seemed to capture and direct the energy of the sun itself. "Energy readings are off our instruments," reported Science Officer Han. "Those orbital rings around Venus are harvesting solar energy on a scale that should be impossible. They're collecting more power than our entire fleet uses in a year, and they're doing it every second." But it was the space around Earth that truly made the veteran spacers step back in awe. Reality itself seemed to bend and ripple around the blue planet, creating barriers that had nothing to do with metal or energy shields. Space folded in on itself, creating pockets of twisted geometry that would redirect any approaching object without violence or force. "Sir," Unji said quietly, "the defensive grid is not technology as we understand it. It's manipulating spacetime itself. Any ship approaching with hostile intent would find itself simply elsewhere." Kyung-ho ordered his fleet to power down all weapons systems as they approached Earth's orbit. The message from humanity had been clear: come in peace. And given what they were seeing, the Admiral had no desire to test what might happen if they appeared threatening. As their ships drew closer to Earth, they found representatives waiting for them in the empty void of space. 3 figures stood on what appeared to be a platform of crystallized starlight, completely unprotected from the vacuum around them. They looked exactly like the humans from the old records: 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal mammals with hair and skin and eyes that moved with intelligence. But there was something else about them that made even the most experienced spacers on the bridge unconsciously step backward. An aura of quiet confidence, of power held carefully in check, of beings who had grown far beyond what they had once been. The lead figure, a woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, raised her hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. When she spoke, her lips did not move, but her voice appeared clearly in the minds of everyone aboard the flagship. "Welcome, friends from the stars," she said, and her mental voice carried warmth and humor. "I am Yujin, speaking for the people of Earth. We apologize for keeping you waiting so long. We needed time to grow." Admiral Kyung-ho activated the ship's external communication system, though he suspected the humans could hear his thoughts as easily as his words. "I am Admiral Kyung-ho of the Galactic Confederation Fleet. We received your message. We come in peace, as you requested." Yujin smiled, and her expression was both familiar and somehow alien at the same time. "We know, Admiral. We have been watching your approach with great interest. Your ships are beautiful examples of traditional galactic engineering." "Traditional?" Navigation Officer Eun-ji whispered, too quietly for the external communications to pick up. "They're calling our most advanced technology traditional." Through the viewport, Earth turned slowly beneath them, and the planet was almost unrecognizable. Its surface was covered with structures that seemed to be part architecture, part living organism, and part pure mathematics made visible. Cities of crystal and light rose from the continents, while the oceans themselves glowed with patterns of energy that moved like vast, intelligent circuits. "Your world has changed significantly since our last records," Admiral Kyung-ho said carefully. "We had believed that humanity had, that your species had not survived." Yujin's mental laughter was gentle but filled with deep amusement. "We survived, Admiral. But we realized that survival was not enough. So we used our time of silence to become something more than what we were." She gestured toward the transformed Earth below them. "We learned to grow our technology rather than build it. We learned to work with reality rather than fight against it. We learned to speak mind to mind across the vastness of space. Most importantly, we learned patience." The human representative looked directly at Admiral Kyung-ho, and her eyes seemed to hold depths that stretched far beyond what any being should possess. "Now we are ready to rejoin the galactic community. But this time, we come not as students seeking to learn from older species, but as partners offering to share what we have discovered during our long silence." The great assembly hall of the Galactic Confederation had never been so quiet. Representatives from over 200 species sat in stunned silence as the human diplomat Sung Minute stood at the central podium, his calm voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Disease no longer exists on our world," he said simply, as if discussing the weather. "We eliminated it completely about 100 years ago. Aging is now a choice rather than an inevitable fate. Our people can live for thousands of years or choose to transfer their consciousness to new bodies when they wish." Ambassador Won-ho of the Trade Federation, a large creature with 6 arms and skin like polished metal, slammed his fist on his desk. "Impossible. Our greatest scientists have been working on these problems for millions of years. You cannot simply solve them in a few centuries." Sung Minute smiled gently and touched a small device on his wrist. Instantly, a holographic display appeared above the assembly, showing detailed medical scans and scientific data. "We also solved the problem of scarcity. Our matter conversion technology can transform any basic elements into anything we need. Food, materials, energy, all can be created from the most common substances in the universe." The hall erupted in voices speaking dozens of different languages. Council Leader Hai-jin, a tall woman with purple skin and silver hair, stood up and called for order. "Silence. Let the human representative speak." But Ambassador Won-ho was not finished. His metallic skin had turned a darker shade, indicating anger in his species. "You watched us struggle with wars over resources, with billions dying from diseases you could have cured, with poverty and hunger across thousands of worlds. And you said nothing." "We were not ready," Sung Minute replied calmly. "Our technology was still developing. We were still learning how to use our abilities responsibly. Would you give weapons to children simply because they ask for them?" A new voice joined the debate. General Kwon-soo of the Hegemony Defense Forces, a warrior species known for their aggressive expansion across the galaxy, stood up with his 4 arms crossed over his armored chest. "You speak of responsibility, but you offer us these gifts with conditions. What right do you have to make demands of sovereign species?" Sung Minute nodded as if he had expected this question. "The right of beings who have learned from our mistakes. We offer our medical technology freely to any species that agrees to stop exploiting developing worlds. We share our matter conversion systems with any civilization that ends aggressive expansion wars. We provide consciousness transfer technology to any people who help establish true democracy in the galaxy." The conditions were simple but revolutionary. No more taking advantage of primitive worlds for their resources. No more wars of conquest. No more ruling classes that kept power through violence and fear. In exchange, humanity would share technologies that would transform galactic civilization overnight. And if we refuse? General Quansu asked, his 4 eyes glowing with challenge. Then you refuse, Sung Minute said with a shrug. We will not force our gifts upon anyone. But we will also not allow you to prevent others from accepting them. The general's laugh was harsh and threatening. You think your little planet can stand against the combined might of the hegemony fleet? We have ships that can crack worlds in half. Before Sung Minute could reply, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Council Leader Haijin activated the emergency communication system, and the voice of Station Commander Jong-sik filled the hall. Council Leader, we have multiple hegemony battle fleets dropping out of hyperspace around the station. They appear to be moving toward Earth's position. General Quansu smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Perhaps a demonstration of our power will help you reconsider your conditions, human. But Sung Minute's expression did not change. He touched his wrist device again and spoke quietly. This is Sung Minute to Earth Defense. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. On the main viewing screen of the assembly hall, the space around the Confederation station suddenly filled with hegemony warships. Massive vessels bristling with weapons moved in perfect military formation toward the distant blue dot of Earth. Their energy signatures alone were enough to destroy entire continents. Then something impossible happened. The hegemony fleet simply stopped moving. Not slowed down, not turned aside, but stopped as if they had hit an invisible wall in empty space. What is happening to our ships? General Quansu demanded, his metallic skin now showing the pale color of confusion. The answer came from Earth itself. Objects that could barely be called ships began materializing around the hegemony fleet. They looked more like living thoughts made visible, constantly shifting shapes that seemed to be made of crystallized space itself. They moved without any visible means of propulsion, bending reality around themselves as they traveled. Within minutes, the entire hegemony fleet found itself surrounded by these impossible vessels. The alien warships tried to fire their weapons, but the energy beams simply curved away into empty space, as if the laws of physics themselves were being rewritten around the human ships. Your weapons cannot function properly in our defensive fields, Sung Minute explained to the shocked assembly. We have learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that hold reality together. Your technology operates within the old rules. Ours has evolved beyond them. Council Leader Haijin watched through the viewing screen as the mighty hegemony fleet was gently but firmly escorted away from Earth by ships that defied every principle of engineering and warfare known to galactic civilization. The age of conquest is over, Sung Minute announced to the silent hall. The age of cooperation begins now. We have spent 250 years becoming strong enough to ensure that our voice will be heard and our conditions respected. He looked around the assembly at representatives from species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Everything has changed, and there is no going back.